Hey everyone, welcome to Mike on Audio. Today we're going to be talking to Bruno Putzeys. He's an incredible engineer, and I can't wait to get to talking to him. So let's get right into it. How are you today, Bruno?
I mustn't grumble. Had a lovely busy day as usual.
Well, I know it's a little late over there, and I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me today. The reason I really wanted to talk to you was because I've recently tried an audiophonics amplifier with your Purify modules that you designed inside of them, and I was blown away. And this came actually from a good friend of mine who had referred me to these modules and has spoken to you in the past, I think via email, and he is just totally enamored by these modules and thinks they're great, and he wasn't wrong. So how did you get your start? Because I know you didn't invent Class D amplification, but you made Class D amplification really good. So how did that get its beginnings?
I think I started roughly like a lot of people on the Class D scene, especially that. Let's say there's been a whole bunch of people who got started on Class D in the 90s, and I started as naively as all the rest, which is to say that when you start with Class D, and especially then for some reason it had the reputation for sounding harsh and aggressive. Back in those days, let's say, so the first toe in the water kind of experiment they would do was with one of those driver chips from Harry's, and one of the reval boards or something that you just sort of base on that, and then and you build something up and try it, and then what actually comes out of the speaker is it can in no possible way be described as harsh. And actually, I later found out that basically most people who said that Class D amplifiers sound harsh had never heard one, but simply assumed that because it was switching, it must it must necessarily sound gritty. So everyone from let's say my generation who started with Class D started off being rather astonished that straight off the bat they were at least pleasant to listen to. And so, like many of my peers, I sort of imagined that I somehow, I mean, considering the reputation of Class D, I somehow had managed to make world's first audiophile Class D amplifier. My luck has been that I then took my amplifier to my father and said, "Well, you've got to listen to that." And he went like, "Oh well, it's got some potential, it's got some promise, but you're not quite there yet." And so that punctured the balloon a bit. If there hadn't been, well, my father and some other people to sort of point out specifically, like, listen to this thing, listen to what's going on with this part of the sound, and so on, I might have never been critical enough to actually say, okay, well, yes, it is promising, but there's more work to be done. And what I find is looking at sort of the history of those past 30 years, that a number of people just had sort of pitched their tent too quickly and said, "Oh, I'm done. It's great," and I've learned not to do that. I've learned actually to say, "Well, okay, I'm happy with the result, but I can still hear this and that, and I should find out why there's still that not sounding perfectly right and everything." So it's learning to be not too happy too quickly, and in a way, my philosophy concerning Class D has actually become even more strict than before. So nowadays, when people ask me why do you do Class D, my answer is always like, I wanted to make an amplifier that's compact and efficient, and that's why I do Class D. But other than that, a Class D amplifier is trying to do just about anything except amplify sound, and you've got to tame the beast. The reality from my past is a bit different in that I actually was not too unhappy with the first result. But the way you should look at Class D is really as a challenge, as something to not as something that you just achieve just like that.
Now, you mentioned your dad. Did you come from an audiophile family? Did you grow up around audio and stuff like that?
Yes, I did. When I was really young, say sort of age 11, 12, I was sort of your classical computer boy. So I had a UK-made 8-bit computer called the Amstrad CPC, and I learned the ropes for programming and programming assembly language and so on that thing, and then moved on to PC. But meanwhile, my father was very much into building loudspeakers, building amplifiers, and so on. And but it never really caught my attention. I mean, I sat in when he and his friends were listening and discussing things, but it sort of never gelled in my head until I was like 16, and I was doing this massive software project, and all of a sudden I said, well, I'm not sure if I want to do this for the rest of my life. So I trotted downstairs to see what my dad was up to, and he had a friend over. And they were doing a shootout between two amplifiers. One was a shiny solid state amplifier from a Danish company. I can't remember what the name was, but it looked very glitzy and very solid and very high end. And then against that, they were pitting a little valve amplifier from the 1960s or 50s or so by a company called Armstrong. A pair of EL84s aside, and the Armstrong amplifier completely slaughtered the Danish transistor amplifier. So, I mean, even with my then untrained ear, that was bloody obvious that there was a winner, and it was not the one that you would expect. So yeah, for me, that was the point where I said, well, this is interesting because there's something to be learned here. There's something we can try and find out about, and clearly these things aren't known already because as we're discussing, they had all sorts of theories, and nowadays I know that those were actually the theories that many of those are still doing the rounds in the audio circles as to explaining, so to speak, why the valve amplifier sounds better and so on. And it was obvious that it was things to be learned, and I started off being somewhat on the fringe end of the field. So I started very much believing, for instance, that negative feedback was a bad thing for an amplifier and all of those things. But fortunately, I kept my eyes open and my ears as well.
That's incredible because the one thing I did notice, and like I said, I have not yet built the eval one. Because I am going to do a DIY project with that, but I do have the Audiophonics who, they design their own interface board. However, they're using, the Purifi 1ET 400As. So my first impression was, first of all, this does not sound like a Class D amplifier. This sounds way too warm, way too nice, way too Class A. So I was like, this is incredible. And the reason I started in all of this was because I purchased, you can't really see them in the back there because it's dark back there, but I purchased two Infinity Reference 8 Kappas. So they require a lot of power on the low end. They dip down to 2 ohms on the low end. And if you can't feed them that power, they're not going to sound really good. They're not going to sound full range how I like it. So that was how all of this got started. And then my friend said, well, take a look at the Audiophonics because Purifi is the best and all this other stuff. And then it all kind of snowballed from there. But you got your start really young because I researched you, and there were some pictures of you very young tinkering around with amplifiers and stuff like that. So you got your start with Philips, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And then you branched out. How did your experience at Philips? Did that kind of pave the way for kind of where you went from there, or was that kind of just a stepping stone?
I absolutely think so. Because I don't know what reputation Philips has in your neck of the woods, but in the audio community in Belgium and the Netherlands, Philips is of course a Dutch company. It's a well-known fact that Philips is a place where a lot of is or was. I mean, the company's changed immensely since, but back in those days and decades before, Philips was a company where an awful amount of absolutely superb research was being done, and so great audio inventions were made by people at Philips. It was really only just the management that was totally incapable of turning these inventions into money. And I think sort of I was at the sort of the last generation of people who have really been able to benefit from that. That is to say, you learn how to design products, you learn how to industrialize them. And I had the additional luck that the office where I was working, which was actually very close to my home, was sort of they always wanted to punch above their weight, and they were kind of unpopular within the with the top management at Philips, because I mean it was this little Philips joint in Leuven, and they really wanted to shut that down. And what Leuven did as a result was just foster anyone they had that had something interesting going. And there were a couple of people doing interesting stuff with wireless audio, and I was doing the Class D stuff, of course, and I was allowed to experiment as much as I wanted, and it was only occasionally bothered with doing something that might be actually commercially useful. I was protected to an unbelievable extent.
So it was a good experimental phase for you. Then you got a chance to kind of use their resources to kind of further along.
Exactly. So I tried basically any of the fanciful audiophiles ideas that I had, plus a number of more engineering-like approaches that were opposed to that. So, for instance, I constructed a fairly baffling circuit, a Class D amplifier, no feedback, that would process DSD audio directly. So, and I was doing that while everywhere else people were only dreaming of that. But I actually had pretty good results for an amplifier with no feedback. I got the lowest distortion ever seen on an amplifier without feedback, and of course it did the magic thing with the DSD, which at that point was sort of hugely hyped as an audio format, and it sounded all right. But then the sort of the thing which I then designed to challenge that was a very simple self-oscillating feedback amplifier called UCD. And let's say over most of for the most part, it actually slaughtered this hugely complicated all DSD no feedback thing. So that really brought home that there was just too much mythology going on, and that the engineering approach would win the day if properly applied.
That's the way to do it. And there's not that many innovators in the amplifier field that I feel I have been able to talk to and really kind of get their ideas. But you're the first that has really revolutionized Class D amplification. Now, after Philips, you worked on Hypex, right? In Grimm Audio.
Yeah.
How was
that's correct. Sorry.
Now Hypex is I mean, I'm going to be using a Hypex PSU on my build. So what did you do with Hypex?
Well, so as I said, Philips had no idea how to commercialize interesting ideas, and so at some point, sort of our local management at Philips decided, well, if we've got this UCD circuit, it really looks promising because it's insanely cheap, and it performs so well that it can basically replace linear amplifiers in quite a lot of applications where at that point linear amplifiers were otherwise the only option. And if the internal customer within Philips wouldn't bite, we would just go elsewhere. and we just started offering the IP to companies outside the corporation, and Hypex was one of those. They coughed up for a license, and shortly afterwards, sort of work at Philips started drying up for me, and the owner of Hypex said, how about joining us instead, which I did, and stayed there for at least 10 years. Grimm Audio was a side project at that point that was together with a number of other former Philips colleagues, that we had some plans on building equipment specifically for the pro audio scene. So we started that company, and that ran alongside Hypex, and I only left Grimm at a point where I saw that it simply was impossible to combine the two with the amount of time and energy that I had.
Right. And then that brings us to Purify. Okay, so can you tell me what makes the Purify modules very special? How did you design them to sound so good?
It's a question that I get more often. How did I design the amplifier for such good sound? But actually, my philosophy is not really to go immediately for sound. The question is that the way that I like to ask the question is, what is the performance that I expect from say a power amplifier, so that it sounds good, and good in this case meaning as close to totally transparent as you possibly can. Of course, that's mostly about getting the performance to be good enough, and there's been a progression in that. So I designed UCD, and then that was followed up by Encore, and Encore was really like a UCD amplifier with an extra bit added in that allowed me to increase the loop gain of the feedback system without risking instability, because that's always a big thing, and you hear that repeated also by people who poo-poo Class D amplifiers, or poo-poo negative feedback in the audio scene. They say, oh, we have negative feedback that's unstable or something like that. Well, no, it isn't necessarily. If you do a good job, it's rock solid, but getting it rock solid is not easy. So then the next thing you need to do is, well, try and figure out, how do I build an amplifier that's got a lot of feedback and is still perfectly stable. And the step from UCD to Encore was doing just that. And that bought me at least about 20 dB more loop gain, and to a degree, the Eigentakt module was very much a further progression from that. So I had to get 20 or 30 or even more dB worth of feedback on top of what I had before. And I mean, it sounds like I'm touting feedback, but the thing is, of course, that every time I do that and then listen to the result, I just find that well, as you say, it sounds more beautiful, warmer, and all those adjectives, confirming every time again my suspicion that warmth in reproduced sound should be not something that an amplifier adds, but should be something that an amplifier preserves in the input signal. The warmth should be there. If the warmth is in the recording, then if the amplifier doesn't meaningfully change the signal, then you're going to hear that. And same with all the spaciousness and detail and punch and slam and whatever adjective you might find. I don't seek to improve any of those subjective parameters consciously or separately or anything. It's really just saying, well, I assume that these qualities are present in the input signal, and all I want is to make sure that the output signal resembles the input signal to such an extent that I can hear all this, all these things actually coming out of the loudspeaker. That's essentially the idea. So yeah, what's the special thing about the Eigentech modules is again a bunch of major and minor engineering breakthroughs to do more really with mathematics, with circuit modeling, with sort of how do you calculate the behavior of a beast like a self-oscillating PWM modulator and so on, rather than actual circuit design. I mean, apart from the loop filter, the circuit of an Eigentakt module is a fairly straightforward classical Class D amplifier. You get a comparator, a MOSFET driver, a pair of MOSFETs, an output choke and an output capacitor. So which is kind of the bits that all Class D amplifiers have, and that is a bit in which the Eigentakt module is in no way revolutionary, because it is just how these things are done. The revolutionary bit is really just in a huge filter that's placed in a feedback loop around that power stage, and that by now achieves a fairly astronomical 80 dB loop gain all the way up to 20 kilohertz, which is not normally seen in power amplifiers. You would normally only see that sort of thing actually in a signal delta modulator for an A to D or a D to A converter, which incidentally is where not just me but other Class D experts sort of get their inspiration from. These techniques are completely unknown in circles of Class A amplifier designs, but they are completely normal with people who design A to D and D to A converters. And well, some people will probably know that I've actually done some work in D to A conversion as well, which was also quite well received. There is this link between these two technologies, which allows me to also to be active in both of those fields.
Harkening back to your time at Philips, you mentioned you asked if Philips was prominent in, or what the opinion of Philips was in the U.S. I personally respect and love them because they brought us the CD, and for me, I'm a huge fan. I mean, I have CDs here. I have Depeche Mode. I have so much stuff going on over here on my desk. I love CDs, and Philips was one of the godfathers of CDs. So, harkening back from that, digital to analog conversion is very important to me because I do listen to CDs, and I like to see what each DAC does. Under which company did you create the DACs?
This is the product is sold under the Mola brand, which is actually a house brand of Hypex's.
Okay.
And the converter is sold under the name Tambaki. It's a fairly high end piece, so it's being, I don't know what the US price is, but it's probably somewhere upwards of 15K. But several reviewers have gone on record, including that Stereophile, saying that this has slaughtered everything else they'd ever heard before. So, as I said, it is well received, and it is a design that I'm quite proud of. A to D and D to A has been sort of a parallel interest for me besides amplifier design, and then sort of over the past 10-15 years, I've also taken a sidetrack to loudspeaker design, as you probably know.
Key Audio.
Exactly.
I have seen a lot of your work. I actually didn't know you were the man, over at Key Audio, and I've seen it online. I've seen it on social media, and it's really some beautiful stuff. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, this is Mr. Bruno's brand right here, Key Audio. I like the design. Now, did you have a lot of input in the aesthetics of the design, or did you kind of just work on the internals and make it sound really, really good?
I'm a bit of a control freak, so I design the aesthetics as well. I'm also the head of industrial design in that way. So the key with the key three was really designed by two by two people. So sort of I took the lead and designed the acoustics and the architecture and the algorithms, and then the actual mechanical design and electrical design was split. I think I basically did most of the CAD work, including the cabinet, which is an injection molded piece. So I actually taught myself how to design plastic parts, and then the actual circuit boards. That was really a matter of just we knew which circuit boards we needed done, what amplifiers, what DSP boards and stuff, and then Bart van der Laan and myself, we just split the work and just took turns designing bits and bobs. But yeah, the industrial design is very much mine.
So what's amazing is that you've taken your experience with Purify, with Hypex, with doing all that stuff, and then you've kind of molded yourself into key audio, which uses a lot of I would assume a lot of philosophies and theories from your time there into the products you're doing now, correct?
Yes, well, I was because Key and Purify are sort of my two main jobs. So I split my time between the two, and I like it that way, because what I do at Purify is very much sort of more research oriented, and at Key it's really doing a finished product. And I like doing both of those things. I would be totally unhappy if I had to spend my life doing only one or only the other. So for me personally, it's a golden combination, because I can get to keep my head in the clouds and keep my feet on the ground at the same time.
I am excited about the Eigentalk project. I didn't know who to contact, so I'm friends with Peter Lingdorf, and that's who kind of got my foot in the door with everything. So, because I know he's part of Purify, correct?
He is. He's one of the co-founders, and he's the main investor in the company.
Yeah, I have had him on this show as well, so I have had a chance to talk to him. He is an interesting character, to say the least. He's got to be a lot of fun around the office, I'm sure. But
absolutely, yeah.
So far, from what I can tell, I'm impressed. I think that I have a feeling that what I'm going to build. And I know Audiophonics tweaked their interface card a little bit, but I think it's going to be fairly similar, because I'm going to be using the same power supply, the same the same modules. The only thing really different is going to be the interface card. So, do you feel the interface card would change the tonality or the signature of the sound at all?
It tends to do so much more than I care, to be honest. In a way, the input board that Purify sells as part of the evaluation kit is almost rudimentary on purpose. Let's put it that way. Because I wanted to leave some space for our OEM customers to sprinkle their own fairy dust, and I didn't really feel that it would make a lot of sense to do the very best input board that I possibly could, and then just find that everyone feels daunted by it. And I actually think, and few people realize that, is that with Hypex, essentially, I sort of started the whole concept of splitting a power amplifier into a low gain, low input impedance power stage, and then an external input buffer, because until then that was always part of the amplifier board. So I mean, other Class D vendors would simply put those two together. And at some point, it struck me that, well, actually there were people swapping out the op amp in the on the input stage, as that was currently on one of our UCD boards. And I said, well, in that case, we might as well simply start putting out boards that don't even have that input stage on there. And yeah, but the idea took off to such an extent that I find commentators about on the internet sort of saying that Bruno doesn't know how to do an input buffer because this and this and this company has made a nicer sounding one. And I just go, yeah, well, I mean, I sort of deliberately held back in order to allow that.
Quick question: can you switch out the op amps on the input board?
Yes, fortunately you can, and actually the way that I use it in my own audio system here in my office is like that, because of course I've got a molar preamplifier which can put out a whopping big signal into a very, very difficult load. So yeah, there's 4 jumpers on the input board. 4 jumpers.
Oh, there is.
You can actually just, you can either set them to connect the connect the input buffer, or just pass the signal straight through from the input. And it's useful because actually there are quite a number of audio sources where adding the extra input buffer, even a fairly simple one, actually improves things, because quite a number of audio equipment sort of isn't that happy driving something like the inputs of a Class D amplifier. So yeah, I would say the first thing I would do is just try both options and see which one works, and also let's say the board is not terrifically DIY friendly because it uses surface mount components, but those who are happy to do surface mount soldering are perfectly free to start swapping out the op amp on the buffer board and see what happens, because what you find is even op amps that have sort of splendid paper specifications are not necessarily perfectly transparent in a given setting. And actually, input stages are almost the hardest things to do for an op amp, because op amps in sort of an inverting mode, almost all op amps are pretty neutral. Use them, but if you use them non-inverting, then all sort of funny things happen, which you can easily measure if you sort of think twice about how you do that.
Is there an op amp in that you would? And I'm not trying to get you to recommend someone else's stuff, but is there an op amp in general that you feel is your favorite, or is the most friendly to use with that interface board?
That interface board. So the interface board sells with an OPA 1612 in it, but it's always worth trying to get hold of the OPA 1656, because it's on paper it's not as good as a 1612, but the input impedance of the op amp is much higher and more and much more linear. So when used as a buffer, it may in quite a number of applications perform better.
Okay, so OPA 1656. Cool. I'll keep that in mind, because yeah, it does make it a little bit more difficult for me in general, because my soldering skills are that of a 3-year-old. But I don't know why I have so much trouble soldering, but I do have a friend that's really good at it. So I will have to acquire his professional skill set, because I'm just used to the unplug it and plug it in and try different op amps like that.
Actually, it's something you can learn relatively quickly. SMD is not as hard as it looks. I mean, nowadays with let's say with the new leadless packages, that's when it really gets annoying. Sort of just an SOIC. Well, that's actually quite easy to work with in my view. So, but although nowadays I can't possibly put an age on my soldering skills, but I can put an age on my eyes, which is 49, and I'm finding it more and more difficult to do fine work on account of that.
Well, I thought it was endearing that you're actually as old as my brother. So I thought it was fun when I saw that. Because I'm like, I wonder how old he is. Because, okay, I mean, let's be honest. When we're dealing with engineers, it's refreshing to see someone with a young, fresh take on it. Because you're young, you're young.
It's amusing because I mean, the first time I sort of landed in a hi-fi magazine, I must have been 28 German hi-fi magazine. Didn't
Oh, that's cool.
And so yeah, they described me as a younger Burschen, like a young like a young boy, or I'd like to call it a young whippersnapper. But it's a bit strange or frightening. I don't know what word to put on it. That now, aged 49, I'm still considered young. So this actually says something about how interesting our field is for younger people. Apparently, not very. So I really hope to see some young blood at some point. So I'd really like to see someone 20 years younger starting to challenge me seriously, rather than me always being the upstart.
Yeah, I bet at if you go to engineering conventions, you're probably like, man, I feel young here. But yeah, I mean, age has nothing to do with it. It's all about your tenacity and your willingness to innovate and to create new things. And I think you've done that. I think you've done that, in spades. You've created these modules that sound absolutely fantastic. So like I said, I'm super, super excited to do this DIY build. I will keep you posted, and if I have any questions, I'll definitely ask. But I think I'll be okay. But is there any advice you can give me or give the audience who chooses to take on this DIY undertaking here?
Well, generally, it's let's say fortunately it's become quite easy in that you've got companies that just make ready-made cases even with all the holes drilled and everything, and they there's manuals around that just say how you have to put everything together, and just literally following the manual, kind of IKEA style, should generally suffice to get you a working amplifier. But one of the more puzzling things that I've found over the years, and is that so we sell amplifiers that then are sold both to DIY people and to professional people. That very often the ones who miswire stuff and blow things up by simply putting the wires wrong are the pros. Because the DIYs, they've shelled out what is relatively for them a large amount of money for some circuit boards. So they are awfully careful about just making sure that really every wire is where the document says that it ought to go. So it is quite unusual to see a DIY mess up in any serious manner. That should put you at ease. Let's put it that way. That if you follow just as carefully as anyone else the instructions, then you're almost certain to be fine.
Good, good. I feel better. I do feel better, but I am excited. I am excited, and I'm sourcing all the parts right now, and it's kind of tough for Americans because we have to go through the EU for everything. You know, for well,
Mm.
for most things. I think Ghent Audio. I'm not sure if they're in because that's who I'm getting the case from. Um,
He's in China.
okay, so we got
Yeah.
China, and we got I'm getting the PSU from Audiophonics. Purify provided the modules, and it's just tough for Americans because we're like, oh man, we got to go through different European countries to get our stuff. But is there any plan to kind of migrate this some maybe a distributor in America or anything like that? Because this is a huge there's a huge following for DIY audio
Mm.
here in America, and I think
Yeah.
that it would be just advantageous to have maybe a small distributor out here.
Actually, well, our drivers are distributed through Madisound, I believe, and wouldn't know about the amplifiers because again, I'm the technical guy, so I don't actually follow all too closely how even our own sales are organized. But let's say we'll always chiefly work direct, just via just placing an order over the internet. It is it is a bit of a slog to do that, but only need to do that once.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, it's a lot more. It is definitely a lot nicer to actually be part of the EU and have everything operate so seamlessly. I'm pretty pleased to be part of that big block.
I to be honest, I want to move to the EU. I think you guys have better hi-fi than Americans, and I'll say that on camera. I think the EU has way better hi-fi than America. But and the thing is about Americans is that they're so. I'm sure I'm going to lose subscribers for this. They're so obsessed with things being made in the USA, and I keep telling them, I'm like, it's just not. It doesn't make any sense, uh, especially
That's
in
there's no point in being obsessed about it. But on the other hand, on the other hand, it is a good idea to have a certain degree of the degree of pride, if only in order to sort of create or, as I said, foster new talent. I mean, the next guy in Class D doesn't necessarily have to be from Belgium or from Denmark. It might very well be an American. That's only going to happen if that person actually feels that there's an interest in what he does. And in actual fact, in Belgium for quite a long time, we've had the opposite problem, which is that I think the expression is no one is a prophet in their own country, and not just Belgium, but generally a number of smaller European countries are sort of mistrustful when something particularly good is supposed to have come out of their own country. They just don't believe it has to come from somewhere else. It can't possibly have come from here. It's really only recently that people have been telling me, like, look, I'm really so proud that this sort of thing is happening in Belgium.
well,
So
I think our main issue here is that people, yeah, there's a sense of pride, but people when they find out certain parts or the unit itself is sourced or built in China or somewhere else, they completely freak out. You know, even though it could have been engineered and designed in America, if it's not put together in America or manufactured in America, they really freak out about it because they want it done here. Um, it, with the financial and social climate we're in, I mean, a lot of companies can't afford to do that. Not in America, you know, they can't afford to build everything here and put it together here because they'll just go out of business. That's why they
yeah,
have to source out to China and other Asian countries and European countries because it just makes more sense that way, you know?
it's been the market. I mean, I mean, a choice has been made in the West that that the market is in control of everything, and as a result, things are done where they are done well enough and cheaply enough. So I don't think. So I think if you're in the market for buying audio equipment, there's no point at that time to of taking it out on manufacturers who have their assembly done in the Far East.
I agree.
It's just, I mean, it's a choice that's been made, and this is how it's turned out. And at this point, I noticed that, well, I'm not the only one. I noticed that even on a technical and quality level, there are now companies in China that can do things that we cannot do in Europe. And I find that that astonishing. I mean, something as simple as a voice coil in a loudspeaker driver. Well, the best manufacturer of voice coils is a huge outfit in China, and their technology is absolutely sublime. They can really do complicated stuff, like if you have some sort of a requirement that's never been done before. You just explain what you want, and a couple of months later you've got samples. And we can't do that sort of thing, neither in the EU nor in the US. And
I can't do that here. Yeah, that's incredible.
Is that a problem? That it may or may not. It almost depends more on your economical and political outlook than it does on the facts.
Agreed. Well, Bruno, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I know it's really, really late in Belgium, and I want to let you rest because I know you always have busy days, right? So
yeah, that's once you start juggling two jobs, that's the kind of thing that happens.
And it's funny because you play it down, you say jobs, but you're running two massive companies, you know.
Well, the good thing is, in neither case, I'm doing the running. So in both cases, I've teamed up with people. In each of those, there's someone who minds the shop. There's someone who looks at manufacturing and all of these things. So I don't need to mind any of that. And at the moment, both in Germany and in Denmark, I've just got such fun. I've just got a dream team in either company.
That's incredible. Yeah, honestly, your team on the Purify side has been very nice, very helpful, super responsive. And I'm excited. I'm excited to work on these projects with you guys and see where we can go from there. I know I kind of came out of nowhere, but I promise you all I will do my best to build it as best as I can, and I will definitely email you or call you when it's finished to tell you my final thoughts. But yeah, I think the video is going to go great, and I think that I want more people here in America to get comfortable with the idea of Class D, because a lot of the audiophile community kind of gravitates towards Class A, Class AB, because they just don't like the way Class D sounds. What's been available to them. They haven't heard what I just heard. And I mean, I'll be honest. I was one of those naysayers about Class D. I'm like, Class D, it's okay, whatever. It sounds kind of cold, kind of shrill, kind of, and that was my whole feeling on it. That's why I never really reviewed a lot of Class D amplifiers or amplifiers in general, because there's always, a really harsh opinion sometimes. But when it comes to this, it was just so mind blowing that, I had to dig deeper. I had to find out who designed it. And that's well, there we go. That's you right there. Thank you for joining me, and thank you everybody for joining us. And please stay tuned, because we're going to be doing a lot more of these interviews here soon.